She collapsed unconscious in the snow, whispered her son's name one last time, and a neighbor found her just in time to call an ambulance. The next thing I remember was light. Not warm light, not comforting light, but a sharp white glow that made my eyes sting when I tried to open them. There was a steady beeping somewhere near my head, slow and patient, like it had all the time in the world. I didn't. My throat felt dry, my limbs heavy, as if they had been borrowed from someone else. "Mrs. Hale? Can you hear me?" A woman's voice floated above me, calm, professional. I turned my head slightly and saw a nurse leaning over the bed, her expression gentle in a way that made my chest ache. She adjusted a blanket around my shoulders, and only then did I realize how cold I still felt, even here. "You're in the hospital," she said softly. "Jacksonville Memorial. You were brought in early this morning." Hospital. The word landed slowly. I tried to speak, but my lips barely moved. My mind searched for the missing pieces, grasping at shadows. Snow, darkness, a door that never opened. "How long?" My voice cracked before the sentence could finish. "You were outside for several hours," she replied. "You had severe hypothermia. Another hour out there, and—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I closed my eyes. Outside, the memory hovered just out of reach, like a dream that refuses to come into focus. All I knew was that I hadn't meant to be there. Not like that. When the nurse stepped away, I noticed my phone on the small table beside the bed. It was plugged into a charger, the screen dark. For a moment, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe there were missed calls. Maybe Evan had panicked when he realized I was gone. I reached for the phone with stiff fingers and pressed the button. Nothing. No missed calls, no messages, no voicemail notifications. Just the time and date staring back at me, cruel in their simplicity. Christmas morning. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with something heavier. Understanding. Maybe. Or the beginning of it. A doctor came in later, a tall man with tired eyes. He explained my condition carefully, clinically, as if speaking to someone else. Hypothermia, dehydration, shock. He told me I was lucky. That a neighbor had noticed me slumped near a porch and called for help before it was too late. "A neighbor?" I whispered. "Yes, you were unresponsive when they found you." I nodded slowly. I wanted to ask more, but the words felt dangerous, fragile, like if I spoke them, something inside me would finally break. After he left, the room grew quiet again. The beeping machine resumed its steady rhythm. I stared at the ceiling, tracing faint cracks in the paint, and tried to understand how I had gone from planning Christmas dinner to lying alone in a hospital bed. I was 72 years old, a widow, a retired school cafeteria manager who had spent her life feeding other people, cleaning up after them, making sure everyone else had what they needed before sitting down herself. I had raised my son alone after his father died, working double shifts, skipping meals, telling myself it was temporary, that it would be worth it. Somewhere along the way, that became my role, the one who waits, the one who gives, the one who understands. As the gray morning light crept in through the window, one thought settled in my chest, quiet but unmovable. Whatever had happened last night was not an accident. And for the first time, instead of fear, I felt something else beginning to surface. Clarity. The memories came back slowly, not in order, but in feelings. Warmth first, then hope, then the quiet fear I refused to name at the time. Christmas Eve had begun early for me. I woke before dawn in my small apartment on the south side of Jacksonville, the air cool enough to make me pull my robe tighter as I shuffled into the kitchen. The place was modest, but it was mine. I put water on for coffee and stood there listening to the familiar hum of the refrigerator, letting myself believe that this day would be different. I had been invited. That alone felt like progress. Evan had called 3 days earlier, his voice distracted but polite. "We're hosting Christmas Eve dinner," he said. "Rachel thinks it would be nice if you came." Rachel thinks, not Evan wants. I noticed it, but I told myself not to read too much into words. I had done that my whole life, translating disappointment into patience, neglect into understanding. I spent the morning preparing food the way I always had. I baked a pecan loaf Evan used to love when he was a boy, the kind with just enough sweetness to feel indulgent. I wrapped it carefully once it cooled, tying the ribbon twice so it wouldn't come loose. I made deviled eggs and a small container of my late husband's cranberry relish, the recipe written in his handwriting on a yellowed index card. While everything baked, I laid the gifts out on my bed. Nothing extravagant. A sweater for Evan I found on sale, a scented candle for Rachel, something neutral that wouldn't offend. For the grandchildren, books instead of toys. I had learned that lesson the hard way. Still, when I added up the receipts, my stomach tightened. Nearly a full month of careful saving gone in one afternoon. It's worth it, I whispered to myself, smoothing the wrapping paper. It's Christmas. Before leaving, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. My hair was thinner than it used to be, my face lined in ways I didn't always recognize. I pinned a small silver brooch to my coat, one Evan's father had given me years ago. It made me feel steady, seen. The drive over felt strangely quiet. I watched houses pass by, each one glowing with lights and movement, families already gathering. I practiced what I would say when I walked in, how proud I was of Evan, how grateful I was to be included. I even imagined Rachel smiling, really smiling, not the tight, polite version she saved for me. When I pulled up to their house, it looked perfect. Warm light spilled through the windows, cars lined the street. I could hear laughter even before I reached the door. I paused for just a second, my hand hovering over the bell. I told myself not to expect too much, that expectations were dangerous at my age. But hope has a way of sneaking in anyway, quiet and persistent. I rang the bell. The door opened, and Rachel stood there in a red dress, glass of wine in hand. Her smile flickered, brief and practiced. "Oh, hi, Margaret," she said. "You made it." I stepped inside, carrying the food and gifts, letting the warmth wrap around me. For a moment, I truly believed I had arrived somewhere I belonged. I didn't know yet that I was already being measured, and found inconvenient. The warmth hit me first, not just from the heater, but from the noise. Voices overlapping, glasses clinking, music playing softly somewhere deeper in the house. It was the kind of sound that says you're late, that something has already begun without you. Rachel stepped aside just enough for me to pass. Not a full welcome, just space. "Everyone's in the dining room," she said, already turning away. "Why don't you set your things down in the kitchen first?" I nodded and followed her, careful not to bump into anyone, as I moved through the hallway. Coats were piled on a bench. Shoes lined up neatly by the wall. Evidence of people who knew exactly where they belonged. The kitchen was bright and spotless. Counters cleared except for trays of appetizers that looked untouched. I placed the pecan loaf and the relish beside them, arranging everything as neatly as I could. It felt instinctive, like muscle memory. I had spent decades doing this for other people, making things presentable, making myself small. "Can I help with anything?" I asked, turning toward Rachel. She didn't look up. She was chopping something at the counter, her bracelets clinking softly with each movement. "No," she said. "Just sit for now. We've got it." Sit. The word landed heavier than it should have. I took a seat at the small table by the window. From there, I could hear the dining room clearly. Laughter rose and fell in waves. Someone told a story that ended in applause. Another voice followed. Louder. Confident. Evan's voice. I waited for him to come find me. Surely he would. Any minute now. I imagined him walking in, smiling awkwardly, saying something like, "Mom, sorry, it's a little crazy in here." That was all I needed. A sign that he knew I was there. Minutes passed. Then more. Rachel moved around the kitchen, busy but efficient, never once meeting my eyes. When I offered again to help, she sighed quietly, like I had asked for something unreasonable. "It's fine," she said. "You'll just get tired." The words weren't loud, but they were sharp. A reminder of my place, of my age, of my usefulness, or lack of it. I folded my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking. Through the doorway, I caught glimpses of faces I didn't recognize. Friends, maybe coworkers. People who knew Rachel well enough to hug her, to laugh easily in her home. I didn't recognize myself in that picture. At one point, I heard my name. Just once, followed by a pause, then a laugh that felt wrong. I couldn't hear what was said next, only the way the conversation moved on, smooth and unconcerned. I told myself not to be sensitive, that I was imagining things. Hosting was stressful. I knew that better than anyone. I had hosted countless dinners with a smile on my face and worry in my chest. But this felt different. This felt deliberate. Time stretched thin. The smell of roasted meat filled the air, making my stomach tighten. I hadn't eaten much all day, saving room for dinner, for the shared meal I believed was coming. When voices began to rise and chairs scraped against the floor, I assumed it was finally time. I smoothed my coat, stood slowly, and walked toward the dining room. As I reached the doorway, the conversation stopped. Every face turned toward me. Rachel froze mid-smile. Evan looked up, then away, his expression tightening just slightly, like a door closing. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Rachel laughed softly, the sound light but edged with something colder. "Oh," she said, "I didn't realize you were still here." The room seemed to shrink around me, and in that instant, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. I wasn't late to this dinner. I was never meant to be part of it. I stood there for a moment, unsure whether to move forward or step back. The silence in the dining room pressed against my chest, thick and uncomfortable. A dozen eyes watched me, waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. "I thought dinner was ready," I said quietly. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. Rachel's smile tightened. She set her glass down with deliberate care, as if she were choosing her next move. "We're about to eat," she replied. "But this is more of a family thing." Family. The word echoed in my head. Evan finally looked at me then, just for a second. His eyes flicked to mine and away again, as if the connection burned. He said nothing. "I am family," I said, the words barely above a whisper. Rachel tilted her head, studying me the way one might study a problem that refuses to solve itself. "You know what I mean," she said. "We just don't need extra tension tonight. It's Christmas." A few people shifted in their seats. Someone cleared their throat. No one spoke up. No one moved. "I don't want to cause any trouble," I said quickly. "I can sit anywhere. I just wanted to be with Evan." That was when she said it. "We don't need you this Christmas." The words landed clean and sharp, cutting straight through the room. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard her, that my ears, already ringing with humiliation, had twisted the sound. But then she continued, her voice calm, practiced. "You bring a heaviness with you," she said. "People feel it. Tonight is supposed to be joyful." Joyful. Around me, heads nodded slowly, some in agreement, others in relief. Relief that it wasn't happening to them. I looked at Evan. I waited for him to say something. Anything. To tell her she had gone too far. To tell me to sit down. He swallowed and shifted in his chair. "Mom," he said quietly, "maybe it's best if you step outside for a bit, just to cool off." Cool off. Something inside me fractured. Not loudly, but completely. I felt it happen. A clean break. The last piece of hope giving way. Rachel was already moving toward me. She placed a hand on my arm, firm but smiling, steering me toward the door like a hostess guiding a confused guest. Let's not make a scene, she murmured. We'll talk later. Later. Always later. The front door opened, and cold air rushed in, biting through my coat. For a split second, I expected Evan to follow us, to stop her, to say my name. He didn't. Rachel stepped back inside, her hand still on the door. Just wait out here a minute, she said. We'll come get you when things settle. Then the door closed. Not gently, not with regret. It closed with a solid final sound that echoed through the quiet porch. I stood there, staring at the wood, listening to the muffled laughter swell again inside the house. Music rose, brighter than before. A toast was made. Glasses clinked. They didn't even wait a full minute. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to steady my breathing. Surely this was a misunderstanding. Surely someone would open the door any second. I raised my hand to knock. The handle didn't turn. That was when I realized I hadn't been asked to step outside. I had been sent away. At first, I told myself it would only be a minute, that someone would realize what had happened and open the door with an apology, maybe an embarrassed laugh. The porch light cast a dull yellow circle around my feet, and beyond it, the night stretched dark and unfamiliar. I waited. The cold crept in slowly, seeping through my coat, settling into my bones. Florida winters weren't supposed to feel like this, but that night the air was damp and sharp, the kind that clings to you. A thin mist hung in the air, cold enough to sting my face. I rubbed my hands together, breathing into them, listening. Inside, the laughter grew louder. I knocked once, gently. Then again, a little harder. Nothing. I pulled out my phone, my fingers already stiff, and called Evan. It rang longer than I expected. Just when I thought he wouldn't answer, his voice came through, strained and distant. Mom, I'm outside, I said quickly. Rachel asked me to step out, but the door's locked. It's cold, Evan. Could you please open it? There was a pause. I could hear voices behind him. Music. Someone laughing at something he must have said. Mom, not now, he replied. You're making this awkward. Awkward. The word hit harder than the cold. I just need a few minutes, I said. I don't have my car keys on me. Please. He sighed, the sound heavy with irritation. Rachel's really upset. You should just head home. We'll talk tomorrow. Evan, I whispered. It's Christmas Eve. Another pause. Then his voice lowered. Don't make a scene. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment before the screen went dark. I tried calling back, straight to voicemail. Again, nothing. The mist turned to a light freezing rain, dotting my hair and coat. My fingers were numb now, my hands clumsy as I shoved the phone back into my pocket. I paced the length of the porch, trying to keep warm, my breath coming out in short, white bursts. Memories flooded in without warning. Evan, at 6 years old, curled up on the couch with a fever, while I held a cool cloth to his forehead. Evan, at 10, terrified of thunderstorms, crawling into my bed and gripping my arm until the thunder passed. I had been his safe place, always. Now I was standing outside his house, locked out like a stranger. My legs began to ache, a deep, spreading pain that made each step heavier than the last. I leaned against the wall, pressing my back to the cold siding, hoping it might block the wind. The cold had a way of sneaking in everywhere. My shoes, my gloves, my thoughts. A car passed slowly at the end of the street, headlights sweeping briefly over the porch before disappearing. I almost raised my hand, but it was already gone. The porch felt farther from the house now, like it had shifted, moved me away from everything warm and human. I tried knocking again, harder this time, my knuckles stinging. Evan, I called out. Please. My voice sounded thin, unfamiliar. My knees buckled suddenly, without warning. I grabbed for the railing and missed, sinking down onto the cold concrete. The shock of it knocked the air from my lungs, I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. They felt heavy, useless. The rain soaked through my coat. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. My thoughts began to scatter, slipping out of reach. I pressed my hands to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. The porch light blurred, doubling, then fading at the edges. Somewhere far away, I thought I heard music swell again. I leaned my head back against the wall, my eyes fluttering closed. "Evan," I whispered, not sure if I said it out loud or only thought it. Then the cold took over, and everything went dark. When I woke again, it was to quiet. Not the sharp quiet of snow and night, but a softer one, padded and controlled. The beeping machine was still there, steady and patient, and the light in the room had shifted to a pale afternoon gray. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the ache set in. My hands burned, my legs throbbed, and my chest felt tight every time I breathed. The hospital came back to me. A nurse noticed I was awake and came over, her shoes whispering across the floor. She smiled gently, the kind of smile people use when they're trying not to scare you. "You gave us a scare," she said, "but you're stable now." I swallowed, my throat raw. How long was I? Outside? She hesitated, then answered carefully. "Just over 3 hours. Maybe a little more." 3 hours. The number settled over me like weight. 3 hours on a porch, in the cold, while my son sat 10 feet away from a locked door. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to keep the thought from splintering me. Later, a man knocked softly and stepped into the room. He was middle-aged, wearing a worn jacket and holding a knit cap in his hands. "I'm Tom," he said. "I live 2 houses down from your son." The neighbor. He explained how he'd gone out early to take his trash to the curb and noticed something dark near the porch. At first, he thought it was a bag or a fallen decoration. Then, he realized it was me. "You weren't moving," he said quietly. "I tried knocking on their door, but no one answered. I called 911 right away." I thanked him, my voice thick. He waved it off, uncomfortable with gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same," he said, though we both knew that wasn't true. After he left, I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the night in slow, unforgiving detail. The words, the door, Evan's voice telling me not to make a scene. I reached for my phone again. Still nothing. No apology. No explanation. Not even a missed call. That was when something inside me shifted. I had spent days, months, years explaining things away. Evan's distance, Rachel's coldness. I told myself they were busy, stressed, that I was sensitive, that I asked for too much by simply wanting to be included. But this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. They had chosen comfort over conscience, dinner over decency, silence over responsibility. The realization didn't come with anger. It came with clarity, a calm, steady understanding that felt almost worse. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. A doctor came in and went over my charts again. He told me I would need to stay another night for observation, that I was lucky. The word landed hollow. Luck hadn't put me on that porch. When the room was empty again, I turned my face toward the window. Outside, the world moved on. Cars passed. People walked by with coffee cups and coats zipped tight against the cold. Life continued, indifferent to the fact that mine had nearly ended on a stranger's porch. I thought about all the times I had told Evan, "It's okay," when it wasn't. All the times I had swallowed hurt to keep the peace. All the times I had chosen silence so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. And lying there, weak and exhausted, I understood something I had avoided my whole life. Love that asks you to disappear is not love. It was the first honest thought I'd had in years. And once it surfaced, it refused to be pushed back down. The turning point didn't come with a phone call or a confrontation. It came quietly, the way most truths do, when you finally stop brushing past them. On my second day in the hospital, a social worker stopped by to help arrange my discharge. She asked routine questions about my living situation, my medications, my finances. When she mentioned follow-up care and whether I had family support, I hesitated. "I manage on my own," I said. She nodded and slid a clipboard toward me. "We'll just review your insurance and emergency contacts." As I scanned the forms, something caught my eye. A list of monthly expenses I didn't recognize, neatly printed from a financial summary pulled from my records. There were amounts highlighted in yellow, small but consistent. $200. Every month. Another one, $50. A third transfer marked Home Services. My heart began to pound, slow at first, then faster. "I'm sorry," I said, pointing. "What are these?" She glanced down. "Automatic transfers. They've been going out for a while. Looks like a couple of years at least." A couple of years. When she left, I asked for my phone and logged into my bank account. My hands shook as I scrolled. There it was, line after line of payments I had set up and then stopped noticing. Mortgage assistance to Evan's account. Credit card payments routed through a shared family folder Rachel had insisted on organizing. Repairs. Utilities. Quiet help, I'd told myself, was temporary. I sat back against the pillows, the room suddenly too small. I remembered Rachel offering to help me simplify things after Evan complained about bills. How she had taken over setting reminders, organizing statements, making it seem like a kindness. How grateful I'd felt at the time. I wasn't just unwanted. I was useful. The realization landed hard, not like a punch, but like a weight finally placed where it belonged. All those years, I wondered why Rachel tolerated me at all. Why the invitations came only when something needed fixing. Why Evan's voice softened whenever money came up. They hadn't pushed me out because I was a burden. They pushed me out because I had already served my purpose. I didn't cry. That surprised me. Instead, I felt something colder and steadier settle into place. That afternoon, I asked the nurse for privacy. I logged back into my account one last time and clicked through each automatic transfer. The confirmation boxes popped up, polite and emotionless. "Are you sure you want to cancel this payment?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Each click felt like cutting a thread. Not violently, cleanly, one by one. When the final confirmation appeared, I set the phone down and exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. I didn't call Evan. I didn't message Rachel. I didn't announce anything. I simply stopped. The effect was immediate, though I didn't see it yet. 2 days later, my phone buzzed while I was eating a late lunch at home. Still weak, but recovering. Evan's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. A few minutes later, a text followed. "Hey, Mom, we need to talk. There's been some confusion with our accounts." Confusion. I almost smiled. Another message came in, this time from Rachel. "I don't know why you're upset, but cutting us off like this is extreme. The kids don't understand." There it was, the pivot. Not concern for me, not an apology, just consequences they hadn't planned for. I placed the phone face down on the table and finished my soup. It tasted better than I expected. Simpler, honest. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And somewhere between the last spoonful and the quiet hum of my apartment, I understood the real twist of this story. They thought locking me out had taken my power. They never realized I had already handed it to them. And now I was taking it back. The quiet that followed was different from any silence I had known before. It wasn't heavy. It didn't press against my chest or echo in my ears. It simply existed, steady and unbothered, filling my apartment the way warm light fills a room at dusk. I moved slowly those first few days back home, still weak, still careful, But something inside me felt unexpectedly strong. I made tea in the mornings and sat by the window, watching people pass with their lives wrapped tightly around them. No one knew what had happened to me. No one needed to. For the first time, my pain wasn't something I felt compelled to explain or soften for someone else's comfort. Evan called again on the third day. I let it go to voicemail. "Mom," his voice said, strained and urgent. "We should really talk. This has gone too far." Too far. As if nearly freezing to death on his porch hadn't already crossed that line. Later that evening, another message came through. Rachel this time. "We don't want to keep living like this. Let's move past what happened. Come for dinner this weekend. For the kids." I read the message twice. Not once did it say sorry. Not once did it ask how I was. It wasn't reconciliation they wanted. It was restoration. Of routine. Of comfort. Of access. I set the phone down and looked around my apartment. The walls were bare in places where pictures once hung, taken down during a recent attempt to declutter my life. I realized then that I wasn't empty. I was making space. The next morning, I went for a short walk, my first alone since the hospital. The air was cool but clean. My breath came easier with each step. I passed a small park where a woman sat reading on a bench, completely absorbed, unbothered by the world. I envied her calm. Then I realized I felt it too. That afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. It was from a nurse who had cared for me during my stay. She wrote about her mother, about how watching me endure everything with quiet dignity had reminded her to call home more often. She thanked me for my kindness, for my patience. I held that letter for a long time. It mattered more than any message from my own family ever had. When my phone buzzed again that night, I didn't rush to check it. I finished washing my dishes first. I dried my hands. Then I glanced at the screen. Evan. One more time. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because I finally understood that answering would pull me back into a role I had outgrown. The one who explains, the one who forgives without being asked, the one who stays quiet so others don't feel uncomfortable. I wasn't that woman anymore. I turned the phone face down and switched off the lamp. The apartment settled into darkness, calm and safe. Outside, the city hummed softly, indifferent and alive. As I lay down, I thought about the night on the porch, about the cold, about the door that never opened. And then I thought about this moment, about the warmth I felt now, not from anyone else, but from within. I hadn't won anything. I hadn't gotten an apology. I hadn't been invited back into their lives on honest terms. But I had something better. I had my peace. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. In the end, what stayed with me wasn't the cold, the locked door, or even the hospital room. It was the quiet understanding that came afterward. The realization that love should never require you to beg, to endure humiliation, or to disappear just to keep others comfortable. What happened that Christmas night didn't break me. It revealed the truth I had spent years avoiding. And once I saw it clearly, I could finally choose myself. This story isn't about revenge. It's about awakening. About the moment you stop chasing warmth from people who keep you in the cold and learn to create your own. 5 life lessons from this story. 1. Love that makes you feel small is not love. If your presence is treated as a burden, the problem is not your worth, but their capacity to care. 2. Silence can be stronger than confrontation. You don't always need to explain your pain to those who refuse to listen. Walking away quietly can be an act of strength. 3. Boundaries are not punishment. They are protection for the parts of you that were ignored for too long. 4. Being family does not excuse cruelty. Shared blood does not justify shared suffering. Respect is not optional. 5. Peace is sometimes the greatest form of justice. When you stop chasing love that hurts you, you make room for the kind that heals. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. What lesson did you take away from it? And what city are you watching from today? Like, share, and leave a comment below. Your voice matters more than you think.